Hello and welcome to this Christmas video. Today we're going to be doing a Christmas Dorset Button angel decoration. And as a bonus track towards the end of the video, I'm going to show you how to make a Dorset Button Christmas Tree. And I'm also going to show you how to make a handmade cord that you can hang your decoration from. Don't forget to have a look at the video description below, where you'll find a full list of the materials that you need to make these buttons. And there's also different video timings for step-by-step stages of how to make the buttons. So the first thing you're going to need are some curtain rings, and they come in a variety of shapes and sizes. Some of the smaller ones I've got here are what I used for the small angel, and the large one here is how I made this angel here. Now your threads, we've got crochet thread. Now this is purlin number 8. And I've also got some variegated thread here. This is Sue Spargo thread that I used to make this particular tree here. There's also some waxed linen or waxed cotton thread that you tend to associate with leather work, and that's what I used to make this angel. And don't forget that all the information to do with these threads is in the video description below. There's also some of this Coats Duet thread, which is a polyester thread. It's quite fine. And it's perfect if you want to make one of the very narrow rings, because you get a nice refined finish. And then there's a selection of the DMC threads, which are 6-stranded. They are embroidery floss, and they come in a variety of different finishes from metallic to satin. Now there's one thing to consider before you actually make your Dorset button, and that's the robustness of the thread. You need to make sure that when you pull it tight, it's not going to snap, because a lot of the work that you're going to create is going to be made under tension, and the last thing you want is for your thread to break. You're going to need a variety of tapestry needles with different sized eyes, so depending on what sort of thickness of yarn you're going to be using, you'll have a suitable needle for it. There's also the sharps needles. So if you're doing any refined work towards the end of the project to do with embellishments and beadwork, the sharps needles are very good for that. You're also going to need some scissors and a variety of beads. Now these beads I've collected from necklaces from charity shops, and I've cut them up and popped them in a jar. Now the one thing you need to think about before you use any bead is to test it. Now make sure that the thread and the needle will go through it, and then just put it to one side. So we're going to start making our Dorset button angel, and the first thing to think about is your thread. Now I tend to use very long pieces of thread that I measure from my fingertip up to my shoulder, and that's called 1 arm length. And for each Dorset button I work with thread that is 3 arm lengths long. So this is a manageable length of thread, but also it reduces the amount of knots that you're going to have throughout your work. So the outer ring is covered in a blanket stitch, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a clockwise and an anti-clockwise direction. So depending on whether you're left or right handed, you'll be able to choose which works best for you. And I'm also going to use very short pieces of thread just for demonstration purposes. So the first thing we're going to do is get the ring and tie a double knot in it. And you'll end up with this tail, and the tail will be going and laying in the direction that you're working in. So you do a big circle loop with your yarn. You go through the ring and then go through the loop of yarn at the back and pull. And as you go along, you're going to be catching this tail into the stitch and then pull it tightly, and then we'll repeat it again. So your big circle with your yarn, you go through the curtain ring and then go through the loop of yarn at the back and draw it in, and slowly the tail of your yarn is going to be getting caught in, and eventually we'll trim it off, and I'll show you that later. So let's do the anti-clockwise one, and this is the direction I tend to work in myself. So double knot again, and then the tail will lie in the direction that I'm going to work in, and I'm going to do my big loop with my yarn, holding the tail of thread and the ring firmly with my finger and thumb, and then through the curtain ring, through the yarn at the back, and then pull it tightly. And as you go along, you're going to create these ridges of stitches across the top, and it's going to be catching that thread in as we go along. The more you do this form of stitching, the more you find your own rhythm, and you'll have your own way of holding the ring and working with the yarn. So after a while you'll get to a point where you've done enough stitches and you've caught in that tail, and you can just trim it off. So just keep going all the way around the curtain ring, and at some point you're going to need to tie the knot. So you just join the threads, give it a double knot, and pull it tightly to make sure it's nice and tight, and just trim it off. And those knots are going to be disappearing towards the back of your work afterwards, so don't worry about that. So you continue until you've got 2 or 3 stitches yet to go, and you can see that here in this gap. And I'm going to cut my yarn and introduce my next thread, which is going to be for the wings of the angel. And this again is 3 armfuls long. So I'm going to do a knot and then just continue with the blanket stitch until I've filled in all these gaps and I've actually completed all the red thread. So we're at the point here where I'm going to start wrapping the angel wings. But before we do that, we're going to turn all these ridges from the outside to the inside, and you'll end up with a lovely smooth edge on the outside of the curtain ring. And any knots you've got, just throw them to the back of the work, just twist them until they go to the back. Now let's have a quick look at this angel here, because it's worth noting the distance or span of the wings and how spaced out the threads are. So to make the wings, we're going to take the thread and hold it under tension and go diagonally straight across. And then we're going to go back under the ring and go across again, and each time we're crisscrossing as we go, and we can do even spaces as we go along. Keeping under tension as you go along. If you think actually it's not working, just unravel it and do it again. And eventually you'll get to a point where you're happy with the span of the wings and you just need to finish it off. So we take the thread to the centre, hold it and pinch it tightly, and then we can do a knot that just draws it all in. So I loop it underneath, catch the loop with my needle and thread and draw it in tightly. And if you do 2 or 3 of those, eventually you'll be able to just release the tension with your finger and thumb and it'll hold its own. And then you can knot the thread at the back and trim it off. So the next thing to look at is the garment for the angel. And we're going to have a look at the spread of the garment itself. And when you construct it, it's worth noting how evenly or densely you want to put your fibre or your threads. So I've knotted the thread at the back. And this again is 3 armfuls long. And I'm just going to work from either side of the spread of the garment. So I'm going to wrap around, keeping the work under tension, and I'm going to do one side and then work out where the symmetrical placement of the next thread is going to be on the other side, so I can actually have an even spread and a symmetrical garment for the angel. Just keep wrapping the yarn round and round until you're happy with how the garment looks, maintaining the tension of your work as you go along. And it gets to a point where you have to tie the threads off and also bind the top of the angel's body to draw it in. Take the threads to the top of the body and hold firmly. Now I wrap the threads round several times across the top and then around the middle, and then do a couple of crisscrosses and then do a binding stitch again, just the same as the angel wings. So I bring the thread round, through a loop and then pull it in tightly, and do that several times until it gets to a point where it just holds itself and you don't have to keep holding the thread anymore. So the next thing to do is to think about the placement of the head. You need to put the needle and thread to the top of the body of the angel and then introduce the bead. You wrap the thread around the top of the curtain ring, pass the thread and the needle through the bead again, and then bring the needle and thread back down, and just ensure that the thread across the top is in the centre. Take the needle and thread back through the back of the body and then crisscross it several times. So the more you crisscross it over, it just lifts the bead up and creates kind of a neck, very much like in this sample here. And eventually you take the needle and thread to the back of the work, tie it off, and then you're done. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, because I've got quite a few more projects coming up. If you press the subscribe button and then hit the bell will notify you when my next video is uploaded. So the next thing I'm going to show you is how to make a handmade cord. So you need a piece of yarn and probably about 2 arm lengths long, and put a big loop in either end. One end you find a pen or a pencil that's got one of these hooks on it, and the other end you give to somebody else to hold, and the whole idea is that this is kept under tension. Now when you have a look at the thread, you'll notice you'll twist it one way and the fibres will open. If you twist it in the opposite direction, the twist will tighten up. And what we're going to do is rotate and twist the thread. What we're actually doing is tightening the twist on the thread itself. And eventually after a while it'll start to kink. So the idea is you must keep it under tension. And eventually when you've got enough twist in the thread itself, you can draw both ends of it in, hold it firmly and pinch the central point. Give it a bit of a twist and let go, and eventually you can rub it down a few times with your hands to even out the twist, and you'll end up with your cord. So now for the bonus project. We've got a Christmas tree. This is made with a variegated thread. And as before, I've done blanket stitch around the outside and introduced a new thread. And in this case, rather than taking off lengths of thread, I'm going to leave it onto the spool, mainly because I don't know how dense I'm going to put my fibres. I rotate the ridges to the inside as before. So I make a note of how wide I want the Christmas tree to be, and I just wrap it round from one side to the other and then infill it, keeping the tension of your threads as you go. And when I've got to a point where I'm happy, I bring the thread to the top, hold it tightly, cut a length of thread and introduce the needle. Now I wrap the threads round several times across the top and then around the middle, and then do a couple of crisscrosses, and then I start binding it in the same way that I did when I was binding the angel's body. I do some binding stitches by making a loop, taking my needle and thread over and back through the loop and then pulling it tightly, and I'll do several of these until it gets to a point where it's just holding its own and it's nice and tight. So the next thing to think about is the placement of the decorations. So there's plenty of decorations. There's these pom-poms, they can be glued on. So there's some of these ready-made bows, they can be glued and stitched on, and then some of these roses. I'm going to go for some of the sequins and some of the beads, and it's worth noting before you do any stitching to make sure that the needle and thread will pass through the bead and the sequin. So you take your needle and thread to the front of the work, introduce the sequin, and then introduce the bead. Go back through the sequin, hold on to the bead, and then draw the thread down, just keeping it tightly as you go, and it will draw the sequin and the bead so it's nice and flat against your work. And then just tie it at the back just to secure it. Then take the needle and thread over to the back of your work and then come through. Introduce the sequin and the bead in the same way as you did before. Go back through the sequin, hold on to the bead, and then draw the thread down. Don't pull it too tightly. And then when you go back through the Christmas tree, just go over 1 or 2 threads over. And then just draw it down ever so gently and it'll hold itself in place. Then come back up in the next position where you want the next decoration to be. Do the sequin. Then the bead. Back through the sequin. And then back through the work, ensuring that you go over, again, 1 or 2 threads over. And then introduce the last sequin. Up. Through the sequin. The bead. Back through the sequin. And then just draw it down ever so gently. And then back through the work. And take the thread to the back of the work, finish off with a knot, and then you've finished. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. Do subscribe and hit that bell to make sure that you're notified when the next video is uploaded. I've got loads of playlists, so please do have a look at those. Check out the requirements lists in the video description below. Thank you for watching again, and I'll see you soon.